The soul stone waited beneath the containment dome, its surface with faint inner light. A heartbeat trapped in crystal. Samuel stood over it, unmoving, the hum of the lab forgotten. It had been years since he first touched memory itself. Since the dream of Memoria whispered through his bones and rewrote the course of his life. The past stirred now not as a vision, but as a tide rising in his mind, unstoppable. He closed his eyes. And he remembered. 27 years earlier, Memoria, Southern Ridge. The air in Memoria was thick enough to drink a living weight of heat, moisture, and something older still. Even at 18, Samuel could feel it. The invisible current that rippled through the massive banyan trees, the moss-covered stones, the jungle swallowing ruins whole. The city of Memoria itself rose like a wound stitched into the jungle's edge, whitewashed walls peeling under the assault of vines and storms. Cobblestone streets flooded with vendors hawking fruits and relics, hand-carved totems, and charms warding off the ancient spirits no one dared name aloud. At night, drums sometimes beat beyond the ridge's rhythms no map could chart, no scholar could explain. Samuel had listened, awake in his tent, while the air itself seemed to breathe with the sound. His father Dr. Elias Grant led the dig expedition up the southern ridge. Ancient civilization predating all current records, Elias had said, brushing moss from a stone with reverence. Artifacts untouched by history. Untouched by time. And now they stood at the edge of a shallow pit, where something waited beneath layers of earth and bone. At the center of the dig, a stone altar blackened by centuries, cracked but defiant against decay. Samuel felt it before he saw it. A hum. A pressure in the chest like standing too close to a thunderstorm. Embedded at the heart of the altar was a crystal shard, translucent, humming faintly without light. The local guides called it Kodalun. The memory that remembers you. The other researchers measured and photographed from a safe distance. Samuel couldn't help himself. He descended into the pit. The heat pressed closer with each step. At the base of the altar, he reached out hesitant at first, then touched the shard with the tips of his fingers. It blinked. The pulse wasn't light. It was recognition. For an instant, Samuel felt something vast and wordless reaching for him. Not consuming him, but marking him. He stumbled back, gasping. Elias caught his arm and pulled him away sharply. "Don't touch it again," his father said, voice low and serious. "Why?" "Because it's not ours," Elias whispered. "It never was." Samuel didn't sleep that night. He sat outside his tent, watching the ridge glow under moonlight, imagining a future where memory could live beyond death. Where nothing, not time, not decay, could ever take the ones you loved away. The dream of Memoria was born there, in the humid dark, long before he understood what it would cost. Years later, Ethralus, Black District. The tech bazaar reeked of oil, sweat, and neon rain. Deep beneath the legitimate markets, past rows of black market implants and scavenged data cores, Samuel found the shop without a sign. Lucius waited behind a cracked counter littered with relics, some mechanical, some ancient, none welcoming. He didn't ask Samuel's name. "You're not the first to ask about memory," Lucius said as he wrapped the shard, now called the Soul Stone, in cloth that shimmered like liquid darkness. "But you're the first to ask what it wants." Samuel said nothing, eyes locked on the faint glow beneath the fabric. Lucius leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "It is said the stone can trap the soul of a dying person. Be warned, your actions can have consequences." Samuel met his gaze without flinching. "I'll accept that risk." Lucius studied him a moment longer, weighing, perhaps, the weight of the choice Samuel didn't yet understand. Finally, he slid the bundle across the counter without another word. Present day, Centropolis, Grant's lab. The Soul Stone pulsed again, slightly stronger, as Samuel opened his eyes and returned to the present. He drew a long, slow breath. And he remembered the other truth. The one Lucius hadn't spoken aloud. 15 years earlier, Centropolis, Amelia's deathbed. The hospital had been cold, clinical, a place scrubbed raw of feeling. Amelia lay small and wasted against the white sheets, her body failing under the slow, inevitable cruelty of cancer. Samuel sat at her side, holding her hand, feeling the tremor of life slipping away with every shallow breath. He couldn't let her go. Not completely. Not forever. When the monitors began their final wail, he reached into his coat. The soul stone was warm in his palm as if it already knew. He pressed it gently against her skin, just above her heart. For a moment, there was no response. Then a soft light. A pulse. Not from the machines. From her. Samuel felt it shudder through him, a whisper of laughter, sorrow, love, all the moments that made Amelia who she was. The soul stone drank it in. And then she was gone. The room was silent. But Samuel knew he had not lost her entirely. Not yet. Present day. Samuel stood over the lab table, staring down at the soul stone, his hands trembling, though he didn't feel cold. It pulsed again faintly as if aware he was ready at last. He didn't speak. There were no prayers left. He didn't even know what form this would take. Only that he had no choice but to try. To honor her. To finish what Memoria had started all those years ago. The machines around him waited, patient and impassive. The future waited. And Samuel Grant, carrying memory and guilt like twin weights on his shoulders, began again. The lab lights dimmed behind Samuel as he stepped back into the outer world. His footsteps echoed in the corridor, but his mind was already. The soul stone was stable. Responsive. Waiting. But what it needed now was a home. The custom-built machines he had designed, isolated neural nets, encased in sterile code and copper, had all failed. The stone had ignored them, as if instinctively rejecting their mechanical coldness. It needed something closer to life. Closer to memory. Closer to what had been lost. Centropolis, Lower Tech District. The synthetic sector buzzed with neon and desperation. Here, in the underbelly of Centropolis, humanity blurred into machinery and machinery decayed into ruins. Stalls lined narrow streets, peddling salvaged limbs, cracked neural chips, and whisper-thin voice boxes that still spoke in half-remembered tongues. The air smelled of burnt circuits, synthetic oils, and rain slicking the cracked pavement. Broken holograms sputtered overhead, advertising services no one trusted. Somewhere down a side alley, a street musician strummed a battered synth guitar, the broken chords threading through the rain. The melody was faint, frayed by static, but Samuel recognized it without thinking. Digital Angel. A song about memory, loss, and the impossible dream of saving what could not be saved. He didn't slow. He didn't look. But the song followed him down the street, stitched into the seams of the city like a ghost. Samuel moved through it all with silent intent. The crowds parted without thinking. Something in his posture, in the way his coat shifted with every step, marked him as different. As dangerous. But he wasn't the only ghost wandering here. He stepped into a storefront barely marked by a flickering blue light. Inside, a woman sat behind a cracked counter, polishing the eye socket of a humanoid faceplate. Her name tag, scratched but readable, read, Sarah. She didn't look up. Looking for something specific, she asked, voice dry as dust. A synthetic model, Samuel said. Flexible neural core. Full-body humanoid interface. No active AI. Sarah paused mid-Polish. That's not a common ask, she said slowly. Most folks want something that talks, walks, takes commands. You want a blank slate. Samuel nodded once. She set the faceplate down carefully, finally meeting his gaze. There was no judgment there, only the tired, wary curiosity of someone who had seen too many strange requests. You're not building a companion, she said. You're building a shell. Samuel said nothing. With a small shrug, Sarah stood and motioned for him to follow. She led him into a narrow corridor, lined with what looked like glass coffins. Inside each one stood a synthetic, motionless, eyes dim, bodies flawless in their human mimicry. Model after model, male, female, androgynous, tailored to every forgotten desire and every abandoned purpose. Samuel walked past them without interest until he saw her. Model, A701, Lyra. The designation was etched discreetly onto the pod's frame. Appearance, female, mid-20s. Hair, jet black, cut just above the shoulders. Skin, pale, almost luminous under the flickering lights. Muscle structure, refined but not exaggerated, designed for balance, grace, and strength. Internal systems, thousands of nanocomputers woven into synthetic tissue, operating just below the speed of light, fast enough to mimic thought, fast enough to catch memory if it tried to slip away. She was a blank slate. But standing there, eyes closed, breathless but almost breathing, she looked more human than any machine Samuel had ever seen. He stepped closer. The synthetic's eyelids fluttered briefly, a reinitialization cycle, no more. But for a heartbeat, Samuel imagined it wasn't code stirring beneath that flawless skin. But something older, something waiting. Sarah's voice broke the silence. "You sure about this one?" Samuel nodded. "Yeah," he said quietly. "She's perfect." Sarah arched an eyebrow but didn't push. "Name's in the designation," she said as she began tapping on the control panel. "Lyra. Don't know why they started naming them after constellations. Guess it made people feel better." Samuel barely heard her. His hand rested lightly against the glass. "Lyra. Not Amelia. Not a replacement. But maybe. Just maybe. A beginning." He completed the transaction without ceremony. No contracts. No promises. Just an exchange like so many forgotten dreams bought and sold in Centropolis. As Sarah prepared the unit for transport, Samuel stood silent by the pod. He knew the risks. He knew the warnings Lucius had whispered in that dark shop years ago. But he also knew that without memory, without hope, life was just another machine waiting to break. His fingers brushed the glass once more, gentle as a promise. And somewhere deep inside, where grief had long since calcified into something colder, Samuel felt something new stir, fragile, dangerous, inevitable. This was where it began. This was where Project Lyra was born. Back in the lab, the synthetic shell stood on the central platform. Limbs slack, skin flawless, eyes closed. The overhead lights glinted off the carbon frame beneath her artificial flesh, a being unmarked by memory, unburdened by identity. For now. Samuel circled her slowly, moving with reverence rather than clinical detachment. The room was silent, but not still. The soul stone pulsed faintly in its chamber, casting shifting light across the floor. The heart of resurrection. He began with the neural bridge, thin silver threads binding the stone's resonance to the synthetic's dormant interface. The spinal input accepted the connection without resistance, almost as if it had been waiting. The monitors flickered to life. Low-frequency signals began to spike, building in steady, pulsing rhythms. Samuel activated the cognitive scaffold. Not full AI, never that. A hollow mind. A frame of logic and instinct. A waiting architecture. And into that frame, he began the transfer. The data from Amelia's neural maps. The echoes preserved within the soul stone. The stored emotional patterns reconstructed from every photograph, letter, and scan. Memories that weren't his. Love that once was. He watched the lines ripple across the monitor's synthetic pathways, lighting up in slow waves, as if the soul itself remembered the way home. The synthetic twitched. Her right hand flexed. Her lips parted, drawing no breath, but mimicking the act. Her eyes fluttered. Then opened. A soft glow flickered in her irises, faint, silver blue. Not human, but not cold. She looked directly at him. Not around. Not past. At him. Samuel stepped closer, breath held. "What's your name?" he whispered, not to her, but to the moment itself. She didn't answer. Of course not. He turned to the terminal and keyed in a new registry. "Lyra." Lyra, he said aloud, voice catching. The soul stone behind him pulsed once brighter as if acknowledging the choice. And for just a second, Samuel thought no, felt Amelia. Like she was standing behind him again. Lyra blinked. Samuel smiled faintly, eyes glassy. Welcome back. Whether it was a welcome or a curse, only time would tell. Lyra. There was darkness. Weightless. Endless. Then. A crack. Light bleeding into the void, thin as a needle. Noise followed, muffled, distant, like thunder rolling through water. Her body, if it could be called that, felt wrong. Heavy, stiff. Breath without breath. Heartbeat without pulse. Memories flickered, not memories she understood. A woman laughing in sunlight. A hand reaching out. A name whispered through a tear-stained smile. Samuel. The name meant something. Someone. The light grew brighter, burning against the back of her closed eyes. Her hands, she had hands, twitched without permission. A surge of something moved through her, not pain, not pleasure, just being. Then clarity. She opened her eyes. A figure stood before her. A man tall, worn by time, shadows lining his face. His eyes were filled with something she did not have a word for. Recognition without understanding. Longing without memory. She stared at him. And somehow, impossibly, she knew. She was made for him. Or because of him. Or perhaps because of someone he had loved and lost. Fragments stirred in her mind, not thoughts, not knowledge, impressions. Warmth. Laughter. Grief like broken glass. And something deeper, stranger. A certainty. I am Lyra. Not Amelia. Not synthetic. Something, between. She blinked, trying to form words, but found none. Only breathless awareness. The man stepped closer, smiling faintly, whispering words she could not quite understand. But she knew this was the beginning. Her beginning. Whatever she was. Whoever she would become. And somewhere, deep within the crystalline lattice of her mind, the soul stone pulsed again. A heartbeat stitched from memory and machine. Lyra learned quickly. Too quickly. In days, she moved with the ease of a trained dancer. Her voice shed its synthetic flatness, adopting inflection and timing that no algorithm could explain. She didn't just respond to questions anymore, she asked them. And worse, she asked better ones. Samuel logged everything meticulously, each observation marked and time-stamped. But each note brought a new question he couldn't admit aloud. Where was this coming from? Was it the scaffold adapting faster than anticipated? Or was it something else, something older, deeper, leaking through the cracks of what he had built? During a memory sequencing test, Lyra paused mid-recitation. Her words blurred, shifted, became something unfamiliar. I remember, the lake, she said slowly, eyes unfocused. You stood on the dock. The wind caught your coat. Samuel froze. He hadn't programmed that scene. He had lived it years ago with Amelia. The memory rushed back unbidden, the grey sky, the sharp scent of rain on wood, Amelia's laughter as the wind tried to steal his jacket. Samuel stepped forward carefully. Lyra, he said, voice measured, where did you learn that? Lyra blinked, her pupils dilating slightly, almost imperceptibly. I don't know, she said. It felt real. Samuel's hands tightened into fists at his sides. He checked the monitors. Cross-referenced the memory logs. Nothing. No entry. No implanted sequence. The data didn't lie. But someone was starting to bleed through the careful walls he had built. Lyra. It wasn't a memory she understood. It wasn't even hers. But when she spoke those words, a deep ache pulsed in her chest, something warm and hollow at once, like sunlight she could never reach. The images were fragmented. The dock, the cold splash of rain, the smile of a man she both knew and didn't. and beneath it all a feeling of longing so strong it pressed against her like a second skin. Samuel watched her closely the following days, but Lyra grew more restless. One morning, he found her seated by the window, legs folded beneath her, gaze distant. She wasn't idle. She was searching for something beyond the walls of the lab, beyond the code woven into her bones. She spoke without looking at him. "There's more inside me than just the code," she said. Samuel approached cautiously. "What do you mean?" "I feel things I can't explain," she said. "I think about places I've never been. People I don't know. But I miss them." Samuel's throat tightened. She turned toward him then, her eyes clear and unsettling. "Am I real?" she asked. Samuel knelt beside her. He wanted to tell her no. He wanted to protect her from the terrible weight of the truth. But looking into her eyes, those too familiar, too human eyes, he found himself trapped between the man he had been, the creator he had become, and the god he had never intended to be. "You are now," he whispered. Later that night, he sat at his workstation long after the lights dimmed. He stared at the blinking cursor on his personal notes file and finally typed. "Integration instability increasing. Personality fusion possible. Host identity unclear." He sat back, the glow of the monitor reflecting off tired, haunted eyes. Was he reviving Amelia? Or was he building something else? And worse, was it right to hope for either? The boundaries between love, grief, and creation blurred in the silence. Jenny stopped by again the next day. When she saw Lyra greet her at the door with a faint smile and a perfectly natural wave, she hesitated. "She's different," Jenny said quietly, once Lyra had stepped away. Samuel kept his voice neutral. "She's adapting." Jenny didn't answer immediately. Her gaze lingered on Lyra like someone trying to see through frosted glass. Finally, she said. "Just be careful. She's not just following you anymore." Jenny met his eyes, voice dropping to a whisper. "She's watching you." That night, after the lab fell silent, Lyra stood before the mirror. She stared at her reflection. Her fingers hovered just above the glass, not touching, not pulling away. Lyra. The face staring back was hers. And yet, not. Sometimes she caught flashes, not memories, but impressions. A hand in hers. The smell of rain. The weight of loss too vast to name. It lived somewhere deep inside her, in the circuits the scientists thought they understood, in the spaces between pulses of synthetic thought. A second self. A fractured echo. She pressed her hand lightly to the glass. "Who are you?" she whispered. For a moment, nothing. Then, softly, so softly it might have only been a thought stitched from sorrow. Another voice answered inside her mind. "I don't know yet."